The scream tore through the sterile quiet of the executive parking garage, a jagged spike of fear that shattered the hum of flickering fluorescent lights. It was raw, desperate, and utterly out of place in the cold concrete order of the space. Wei Chen, halfway to the service stairwell, froze. His faded janitor's uniform clung to him, the worn straps of his backpack suddenly heavy, tethering him to the unremarkable life he'd fought to maintain. He pressed himself against a hulking concrete pillar, peering cautiously around its edge. In stall 1, reserved for the CEO, a scene of calculated violence unfolded. 2 of the company's stone-faced bodyguards lay crumpled on the ground, motionless. 4 men, their faces hidden behind black ski masks, had cornered a woman against a sleek black sedan. Wei recognized her instantly from the polished corporate portraits in the lobby, Mei Lin, the CEO. Her sharp features, framed by dark hair now tangled from her struggle, were unmistakable. One of the men, built like a brick wall, gripped her arm, yanking her toward a black van with its side door gaping open like a predator's jaw. "Get in the van, now," the man snarled, his voice low and menacing. Wei's pulse thundered in his chest. Every instinct screamed at him to flee. He was just a janitor, a shadow who spent his nights scrubbing floors and emptying trash cans for the city's elite. He had a 6-year-old daughter, Hannah, waiting at home, her small hands clutching the drawings she'd made for him. He'd sworn to himself, to the memory of his wife, that the days of controlled violence, his years as a martial arts instructor, were buried, left behind with the dojo he'd abandoned. Janitors didn't play hero. But then Mei screamed again, a sound that wasn't just fear but a call to action, piercing the fragile peace he'd built. In that moment, his promises felt like chains he could no longer bear. The janitor faded, and the fighter, the man whose hands had once been honed into weapons, emerged from the shadows. Wei moved with a silent, lethal grace that belied his plain uniform. The man holding Mei didn't see him until it was too late. Wei didn't swing wildly, he struck with precision, an open palm blow to the man's elbow joint. A sickening crack echoed as the arm buckled, the man's grip on Mei dissolving as he howled in pain, clutching his useless limb. The second assailant whirled, yanking a crowbar from his belt and swinging it in a deadly arc toward Wei's skull. Wei didn't flinch. He stepped inside the swing, his forearm redirecting the man's wrist while his other elbow snapped upward, connecting with the man's jaw in a clean, practiced strike. The assailant's head snapped back, and he collapsed like a marionette with severed strings. 2 down. The remaining 2 released Mei, their shock morphing into fury. They charged together, fists flying in a storm of raw aggression. They were brawlers, used to overpowering with brute force, unprepared for Wei's calm precision. He was a still point in their chaos, redirecting their momentum like water around a stone. He dodged a wild punch from the third man, seizing his wrist and pulling him off balance into the fourth. They crashed together in a tangle of limbs. Before they could recover, Wei struck again, a sharp kick to the third man's knee, sending him crumpling, followed by a spinning strike to the fourth man's temple. Both hit the concrete in a groaning heap. The fight was over in seconds. The garage fell silent, save for the pained moans of the attackers and Mei's shallow, ragged breaths. She had staggered back against her car, her wide eyes fixed not on the fallen men but on Wei, the janitor who'd become something else entirely. The fighter's calm drained from him, replaced by a flood of dread. What had he done? He rushed to her side, his voice low and urgent. "Ms. Lin, are you hurt?" She shook her head, her gaze locked on him, searching his face as if he were a riddle she couldn't solve. In that moment of distraction, Wei made a fatal error. He took his eyes off the threat. Tires screeched. The 4 men, battered but desperate, scrambled into the van. Its engine roared, and it sped out of the garage, swallowed by the night. Wei's heart sank as the distant chime of the executive elevator rang out, followed by the pounding of footsteps and urgent shouts. "Ms. Lin, code red in P1. More security was coming." Wei shot to his feet, his mind racing. He couldn't stay. A janitor who could dismantle 4 attackers would raise questions that would unravel the past he'd buried to protect Hannah. He met Mei's eyes one last time. Her expression was a mix of shock, fear, and something unreadable, gratitude, perhaps, or suspicion. "Stay here. Help's coming," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. He didn't wait for a reply. He melted back into the maze of concrete pillars, his pulse hammering as he slipped into the service stairwell. He was a ghost again, a man in a worn uniform, leaving behind a scene of impossible chaos, 2 unconscious bodyguards and a CEO saved by a stranger she'd never truly noticed. At the street-level bus stop, Wei forced his breathing to steady, blending into the crowd of weary faces. His knuckles ached, the ghost of his old life clinging to him like damp cloth. He prayed the dim garage lights and the blur of violence had obscured his face. He prayed he could remain Wei Chen, Hannah's father, nothing more. But as the bus pulled up with a hiss, a cold certainty settled in his gut. The quiet life he'd fought for was gone. The echo of that scream would follow him home. Wei Chen slipped into their modest second-floor apartment, the faint scent of jasmine from a wall diffuser mingling with the lingering sweetness of red bean paste from Hannah's breakfast. It was the smell of sanctuary, of a life carefully stitched together. He moved quietly to his daughter's room. Hannah lay curled beneath a panda-themed blanket, her small chest rising and falling in the soft glow of a star-shaped nightlight. This was why he'd fled the garage, her peaceful, fragile world. For 2 years since his wife, Li Na, had passed, Wei had built this haven brick by brick, a steady janitor's job, predictable routines, no ripples. Tonight, he'd swung a wrecking ball through it all. He sank into the frayed armchair in the corner of Hannah's room, adrenaline giving way to a crushing exhaustion and a gnawing dread of what dawn might bring. Meanwhile, back in the stark chill of the parking garage, Mei Lin stood amid a storm of activity. Her head of security, a grim-faced man named Jian Wu, barked orders into a radio as paramedics tended to her 2 downed bodyguards. They'd suffered concussions but would recover. Police swarmed the scene, their flashing lights casting jagged blue and red shadows across the concrete. "Ms. Lin, we need to move you to a secure location," Jian said, his voice taut with professional shame. His team had failed her. Mei barely registered his words. Her mind replayed those 10 seconds of impossible violence, the blur of the janitor's uniform, the fluid precision of his movements. He hadn't fought like a street thug, he'd moved with the grace of a calligrapher, each strike a deliberate stroke, dismantling 4 men before they could react. And his eyes, in that fleeting moment when he'd knelt beside her, held not rage but a quiet, urgent worry, then raw panic as he realized he'd been seen. "The security footage," Mei said, cutting through Jian's tense chatter. "I want it now." "Ma'am, the police will handle." "Now, Jian," she snapped, her voice carrying the steel that had made her the youngest CEO in the company's history. "In my office." 15 minutes later, Mei sat in her sprawling corner office, the city's neon glow stretching out below. Jian stood by her desk, his expression dour as he pulled up the footage on her monitor. "The angle's poor, Ms. Lin. A pillar blocks most of it." The grainy video flickered to life. Mei watched the attack unfold, her own fear a cold weight in her chest. Then a figure emerged from behind the pillar. The footage was too blurry for a clear face, but it captured the motion, the shocking speed, the surgical efficiency. She saw him disable the men, rush to her side, and then, for a split second, glance toward a secondary camera. His face, caught in a moment of unguarded panic, before he vanished into the shadows. "Freeze it," Mei ordered. "Right there." Jian paused the frame. "It's not clear enough for facial recognition." "I don't need facial recognition," Mei said, leaning closer to the screen. "I know who he is. He's a janitor, night crew. Find his name." Jian blinked, incredulous. "A janitor? Ma'am, that's the only reason you're not explaining my kidnapping to the board right now," she said, her voice sharp as frost. "Get me his file." An hour later, the file lay on her desk. Wei Chen, age 35, employed by Lin Enterprises' contracted cleaning service for 22 months. A standard ID badge photo stared up at her. It was him. Those same steady, haunted eyes. Beneath the sparse employee data, a single line stood out: previous employment, self-employed. Too vague. Mei grabbed her phone. "Get me a full background check on Wei Chen. Everything. Expedited. Cost doesn't matter." She dismissed Jian and the police, claiming she needed rest. But rest was impossible. She paced her office, the image of Wei's movement seared into her mind. The attack had been no random crime, it was targeted, professional. Someone wanted her gone. A rival? A board member? The possibilities coiled like venomous snakes. Her security had failed. The police were plodding through protocol. The only one who'd acted effectively was a man who scrubbed floors for a living, a man who'd fled not like a criminal, but like someone terrified of being noticed. At 3 a.m., her private email chimed. The encrypted background check had arrived. Mei opened it, and Wei's buried life spilled across the screen. Wei Chen, former owner and head instructor of the Path of Balance Martial Arts Academy. Photos showed a younger Wei, his smile bright, a black belt cinched around his waist. He'd competed nationally, trained security personnel, built a reputation on discipline and skill. Then came the tragedy: his wife, Li Na, struck by a rare, relentless cancer. The academy was sold to cover medical costs, but the debt had mounted anyway. 2 years after her death, Wei Chen, the master, the champion, had vanished into obscurity, taking a job where he could fade into the background, unseen. Mei sank into her leather chair, the pieces snapping into place. He wasn't hiding from the law, he was hiding from life itself. He possessed skills her multi-million-dollar security team couldn't match, yet he used them to mop floors. A fierce resolve crystallized within her, sharp and unyielding. Mei Lin's world was a chessboard of men in tailored suits, their loyalty as fluid as stock prices, their ambitions cloaked in smiles and handshakes. Her life was under threat, surrounded by predators posing as allies. She couldn't trust them, not her board, not her security team. But she could trust him, the man who'd acted not for profit or fame, but out of a raw, selfless instinct. The man who'd risked everything to save a stranger. She stood, snatching her car keys and the manila folder with Wei Chen's address. Jianwu would lose his mind if he knew she was leaving without a security detail. She didn't care. His version of protection had failed her. She needed a true guardian. The engine of her sleek silver Maserati purred to life, its opulence stark against the pre-dawn stillness. Mei drove through the sleeping city, leaving her corporate tower behind for the modest, working-class neighborhood Wei called home. As the first pale light of dawn brushed the horizon, her car, a gleaming anomaly, slowed in front of a weathered three-story brick apartment building. He was inside, the man who held the key to her survival, and she was about to upend his carefully guarded world. The knock came at 7:15 a.m. Wei, sleepless, felt a surge of icy adrenaline. He was in the kitchen, preparing Hannah's lunch, a peanut butter sandwich cut into a heart shape, just as she liked it. His hand froze over the bread. The knock was too sharp, too early for a neighbor, too deliberate for a friend. This was it, the police, or worse, company security. The consequences had found him. "Daddy, someone's at the door," Hannah called from the living room, where she sat cross-legged, watching anime. A half-eaten bowl of rice porridge sat on the low table in front of her. "I know, sweetheart." "Stay there," Wei said, his voice steadier than his racing heart. He wiped his hands on a dish towel, his pulse hammering as he approached the door. Peering through the peephole, his breath caught. It wasn't the police. It was her, Mei Lin. She stood in the dim, linoleum-floored hallway, a vision of corporate power utterly out of place, her silver Maserati visible through the hallway window. He took a deep breath and opened the door. Up close, she was even more formidable. Her tailored black pantsuit was razor-sharp, her dark hair swept into a tight, elegant bun. Her dark eyes missed nothing, scanning the modest interior of his apartment, the faded rug, the anime on the TV, Hannah's watercolor paintings taped to the walls. "Mr. Chen," she said, her voice crisp, stripped of the fear he'd heard hours ago. "Ms. Lin," he replied quietly, instinctively angling his body to shield the doorway, a futile barrier between her world and his. "What are you doing here? May I come in?" It wasn't a question. He hesitated, then stepped aside. She crossed into his living room, her polished heels silent on the worn carpet. Her gaze flicked to the anime, the crayon art, the fragile normalcy he'd built. "I came to thank you," she said, turning to face him. "You saved my life." "I didn't do anything," he said, the lie bitter on his tongue. "I was just there." A faint, sharp smile curved her lips. "Don't insult my intelligence, Mr. Chen." She held up the manila folder. "Or should I say, Sensei Chen, former head of the Path of Balance Academy. Black belt, trainer of private security. You're not a janitor. You're a warrior in a janitor's uniform." Wei's stomach dropped. She dug up his past, the life he'd buried under years of routine and anonymity. "That life is gone," he said, his voice flat. "I'm just a father raising his daughter." "The men who attacked me were professionals," Mei continued, undeterred. "That wasn't a robbery, it was a planned abduction, and it'll happen again. My security team, who I pay millions for, were useless. You stopped them." She stepped closer, her eyes locking onto his. "I'm offering you a job, effective immediately. Head of my personal security. You report to me alone. Name your price." The offer hung between them, as absurd as it was terrifying. Wei shook his head. "I appreciate it, Ms. Lin, but no. I can't." "Why not?" He gestured to the small apartment, the sound of Hannah's anime filling the silence. "This is my life now. It's quiet. It's safe. I left that world to protect her." His voice thickened with the weight of memory. "I won't bring danger near my daughter. Ever." He braced for her to push, to argue. Instead, she nodded, as if she'd expected his refusal. "You think the quiet life is still yours to keep?" Her voice was soft, dangerous. "Those men aren't amateurs, Wei. They'll want to know who stopped them. You're a loose end, a janitor who took down 4 professionals. What happens to Hannah's safety when they come looking for you?" His blood ran cold. She'd turned his own reasoning against him, exposing a truth he hadn't faced. He'd been so focused on the danger of accepting her offer that he hadn't considered the cost of refusing. "The danger isn't here because of you," she pressed, sensing his hesitation. "It's here because of what you did last night. Your choice now is whether you face it with my resources behind you or wait for it to find you here, alone." She set the folder on his coffee table, next to Hannah's bowl of porridge. I can give your daughter a life you can't imagine, top schools, a house with a garden, a future without worry. All you have to do is what you're best at, protect people. Wei stood frozen, the walls of his safe world collapsing around him. Wei felt a small hand slip into his. He looked down to see Hannah standing beside him, her wide, curious brown eyes fixed on the stranger in their living room. Daddy, who's that? She whispered. Mei Lin's demeanor softened instantly, the steely CEO giving way to something warmer. She knelt to Hannah's level, her voice gentle. Hello there, she said. My name is Mei. It's very nice to meet you. I'm Hannah, his daughter replied shyly. Are you a princess? Your car's all shiny like one. A genuine smile broke across Mei's face, softening her sharp edges. Something like that, she said. Your daddy is a very brave man. Did you know that? Hannah beamed, gazing up at Wei with pure adoration. He's the bravest, she said with the unshakable certainty of a 6-year-old. That was the final crack in Wei's resolve. Seeing Hannah's pride, Mei's warmth toward her, and the cold logic of Mei's warning sinking in, he couldn't hide from who he was. Being a protector was in his bones, and denying it wouldn't keep Hannah safe, it would only leave her exposed. He exhaled, the weight of surrender heavy in his chest. All right, he said, the words foreign on his tongue. I'll do it. Mei stood, her professional mask sliding back into place, though her eyes gleamed with triumph and relief. She pulled a sleek metallic card from her pocket, not a business card, but a high-level security pass. This grants you access to everything, my office, my home, the security hub. Your job starts now. My car's waiting downstairs. She paused, her gaze softening as it flicked to Hannah. We'll discuss your salary and arrangements for Hannah's care later today. I promise, she'll be cared for like my own. She turned and strode to the door, leaving Wei in the center of his living room, the key card both weightless and crushing in his hand. His life as a janitor was over. Daddy, Hannah whispered, tugging his sleeve. Is that lady your new boss? Wei looked at his daughter, then at the card, a gateway to the dangerous world he'd fled. He was no longer a shadow. He was the shield. Yes, sweetheart, he said, his voice rough. I guess she is. The 45-minute drive to Lin Tower was a quiet, surreal blur. Wei sat in the passenger seat of Mei's Maserati, the scent of fine leather a stark contrast to the disinfectant tang of his janitor's cart. Mei drove with a calm, focused intensity, navigating morning traffic as if the chaos of the past 12 hours were just another corporate puzzle. They didn't speak. The deal was sealed, the work had begun. Before leaving, Wei had called his neighbor, Mrs. Kim, an elderly widow who doted on Hannah like a grandmother. He'd woven a vague tale of a work emergency and a sudden promotion, asking her to take Hannah to school and watch her afterward. Mrs. Kim's voice had brimmed with delight at his good fortune. The lie sat heavy in his chest, the first of many he'd have to tell to shield Hannah from the truth. As they pulled into the private underground entrance of Lin Tower, the same garage where he'd fought hours ago, Wei's stomach tightened. Mei swiped a card, and a heavy gate lifted, revealing a restricted section he'd never accessed as a janitor. She parked in the CEO's reserved spot, stall 1. Jian Wu, my former head of security, will meet us in the security hub, Mei said, breaking the silence as she turned off the engine. He's not pleased. None of them will be. They'll see your uniform, not your skill. Don't let their blindness become yours. It won't, Wei said quietly. He followed her to a private elevator. As the doors opened into the main lobby, a few night shift janitors, just finishing their shift, spotted him. Their eyes widened, registering the incongruity. Wei, in plain clothes, emerging from the executive elevator with the CEO. He gave them a subtle nod and kept walking, leaving their confusion behind. The security hub, located in the sub-basement, was a sterile, high-tech nerve center, humming with servers and lined with high-definition monitors. Jian Wu stood waiting, his broad frame rigid with military precision, his eyes cold with resentment. 2 other guards flanked him, their faces a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Ms. Lin, Jian said, his tone clipped, ignoring Wei. I strongly advise against this. An unvetted civilian. He's not a civilian, Mei cut in, her voice sharp as a blade. As of this morning, he's your boss. She turned to Wei. This is your command. I'll be in my office. Her heels clicked down the corridor, leaving Wei alone with the hostile trio. A tense silence settled. Jian crossed his arms, his gaze dripping with disdain. So, the janitor's running the show now. What's your first order? Check the floor polish. The other guard smirked. Wei ignored the jab, stepping to the main console and scanning the wall of monitors. Pull up the P1 footage from last night, all angles. Sync the audio from your team's comms. Jian scoffed but nodded to a younger guard, who typed a command. The screens lit up with the chaotic ballet of last night's fight, captured from multiple perspectives. Wei's face remained impassive. He wasn't watching himself, he was studying the attackers. There, Wei said, pointing at a monitor. Rewind 10 seconds before the first contact. Zoom in on your men. The guard complied. The footage showed Mei's 2 bodyguards escorting her to her car, looking relaxed. Play it in slow motion, Wei ordered. He pointed at one guard's ear. See his hand? He's tapping his earpiece. He's lost comms. Now the other one, same gesture, 1 second later. Their comms were jammed. That's why they were caught off guard. Jian's smirk faded. He leaned closer to the screen, caught off guard himself. Now the van, Wei continued, moving to another monitor showing the vehicle speeding away. It's a standard commercial model, untraceable, but look at the rear window. He pointed. A small decal. A crane, maybe. It's a Falcon decal, Wei said, his voice steady but carrying a new edge of authority. Not standard. It's a marker. Our first lead. The guard at the console stared at the screen, stunned. None of them had noticed the decal. From now on, nothing gets near Ms. Lin without my approval, Wei continued. We change her routes to and from the office daily. 3 men escort at all times, not 2. 1 stays with the car. I want full files on every security staff member, day and night shifts, financial issues, grudges, unusual behavior. The threat isn't just outside this building. It's inside. The guards exchanged uneasy glances. Jian Wu's hostility had softened into reluctant respect. This man saw what they missed, thought like a hunter, not a guard waiting for a signal. A light blinked on the console. Delivery for Ms. Lin, a guard announced. From Lotus Bloom Floral. A rare orchid. It's cleared for entry. Wei's eyes narrowed. Hold it at reception. I'll check it myself. He left the hub and headed to the lobby, where a courier waited with an elegantly wrapped box. Wei signed for it and carried it to an empty conference room, setting it on the polished teak table. He opened it carefully. Inside was a striking orchid, its deep violet petals almost otherworldly. Beautiful, perhaps a gesture of goodwill. But Wei didn't trust beauty. He ran his fingers along the ceramic pot, probing for anomalies, then sifted through the dark soil. His fingers brushed something small and hard near the roots. He extracted it, a tiny, sophisticated listening device, its microphone nearly invisible. A chill ran through him. They weren't just after Mei's life, they wanted her secrets. The delivery had been cleared. Someone inside had approved it. Wei took the private elevator to the top floor and entered Mei's office without knocking. She was mid-call, her voice sharp and authoritative. She froze when she saw his expression. I'll call you back, she said, hanging up. What is it? Wei opened his palm, revealing the tiny black bug. They're already in your office, he said grimly. Mei stared at the device, her face paling before hardening into cold fury. This wasn't just an attack, it was an invasion of her mind, her strategies, her empire. She looked at Wei, and in that moment, he wasn't just her employee. He was her only ally. She grabbed a pen and slid a sleek notepad toward him. They could be listening now. Wei nodded, his eyes sweeping the room, reassessing every object, the lamps, the digital art displays, the phone, as potential threats. He wrote, we need to sweep your office, home, car, everything. I know someone from my old life. I trust him. Mei gave a sharp nod. Do it. The weight of her trust settled on Wei like a mantle. 2 days ago, he was scrubbing her floors. Now, her life and her empire rested in his hands. He pulled out his phone and sent an encrypted text to a number he hadn't used in years. Ryu, I need a favor. Urgent. The reply was instant, name the time and place, sensei. For you, anything. That evening, after the last executives had left, a young man with keen eyes and a neatly cropped undercut arrived at the executive lobby, dressed as an IT consultant with a rolling case of equipment. This was Ryu Sato, a former student Wei had mentored as a troubled teen, channeling his knack for electronics into a disciplined career in cybersecurity. Now, Ryu ran a top-tier technical surveillance countermeasures firm. Been a while, sensei, Ryu said quietly as Wei led him to Mei's darkened office. Wish it were under better circumstances, Wei replied. For 2 hours, Ryu worked with silent precision, his equipment scanning for rogue frequencies. He found a second bug taped behind a large inkwash painting on Mei's wall, then a third, smaller one embedded in her desk phone's base. Military grade, Ryu murmured, sealing the devices in evidence bags. Whoever's behind this has serious resources. They've been hearing everything. Mei, watching in tense silence, finally spoke. The orchid came from Lotus Bloom Floral. While Ryu finished the sweep, Wei accessed a computer in the security hub, digging into the floral company. The order was a dead end, a cash purchase made 3 days prior, no name, no contact, no trace. Exactly as the sender intended. They're covering their tracks, Wei said, frustration tightening his voice as he returned to the office. Maybe, Ryu said, holding up one of the evidence bags. But even pros leave a signature. He pointed to the bug from the orchid. This one's power source is custom, a microbattery, rare. I've seen it before, linked to a specific tech supplier. Only a few manufacturers produce these microbatteries, Ryu said, examining the tiny device under a magnifying lens. They're sold to an exclusive clientele. I'll take these to my lab and trace the components to a buyer. By the time Ryu packed his gear, it was nearly midnight. Mei, pale and drained, insisted on driving Wei home. The silence in the Maserati was different now, not tense, but a shared quiet, like two warriors after a brutal skirmish. Your friend Ryu, Mei said as they glided through the empty streets. He's loyal to you. I helped him when he was young, Wei said simply. He just needed guidance. You're good at that, she said softly, glancing at him. Tell me about Hannah. The question caught Wei off guard. He rarely spoke of his daughter to anyone, let alone the CEO of a global corporation. But Mei's exhaustion and vulnerability disarmed him. He found himself talking about Hannah's love for sketching, her silly riddles, the way her brow furrowed when she tackled a puzzle. His voice warmed the leather-scented interior with love and pride. When they pulled up to his apartment, Mrs. Kim stood at the door with a sleepy Hannah, who'd insisted on waiting up to see her dad. Hannah's eyes lit up at the sight of Wei, but then she spotted Mei stepping out of the car. She darted past her father, clutching a piece of paper. Hi, Princess Mei, she said, holding up a drawing. I made you a picture of your shiny car. The sketch was a child's vibrant scribble, a silver rectangle with 4 black circles, stick figures of Hannah and Mei inside. Mei crouched down, her fatigue melting as she accepted the drawing like a rare treasure. Hannah, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I'm putting this in my office. She glanced up at Wei over Hannah's head, and in the dim streetlight, he saw a flicker of loneliness in her eyes, a yearning for this simple warmth. Later, after thanking Mrs. Kim and tucking Hannah into bed, Wei sat in his armchair, the apartment's silence heavier than ever. His phone buzzed, a text from Ryu. Got it. The microbatteries were part of a batch sold 6 months ago to a private security firm, Titan Security Solutions. Wei's blood ran cold. He knew that name. He pulled up the file he'd compiled on Lin Enterprises' security staff and board members. His fingers raced across the keyboard. Another text from Ryu came through. You won't believe who owns Titan. It's a subsidiary of a holding company tied to one of your board members, Hiro Tanaka. Wei stopped typing. Hiro Tanaka, a board member known for his ruthless ambition, who'd bitterly opposed Mei's appointment as CEO. The enemy had a name and a face, and he sat at Mei's boardroom table, smiling while plotting her downfall. The name glowed on the screen like a cold warning. Wei's mind, honed for strategy and threat assessment, kicked into gear. He had a name, but no hard proof. Tanaka was insulated by layers of corporate shells and deniability. Owning a security firm wasn't a crime. Going to the police would be useless. Tanaka would bury them in lawsuits, paint Mei as paranoid and Wei as a delusional janitor. A direct confrontation would fail. They needed to force Tanaka's hand. The next morning, Wei wasn't at Lin Tower. He was parked in a nondescript sedan a block from an upscale gated community in the city's wealthiest suburb, watching as Mei's Maserati pulled out, her face a determined mask behind the wheel. He followed at a distance. They'd agreed via encrypted texts to avoid her home and office, both compromised. Their new base was a small, soundproofed studio Ryu had leased under an alias hours earlier. Inside the studio, tension hung thick. Wei laid out the evidence, the corporate links tying Tanaka to Titan Security Solutions, the military-grade bugs, the Falcon decal. He's been my family's rival for years, Mei said, her voice a low, dangerous hum. His father clashed with mine. Hiro thought he deserved the CEO role when my father retired. He's never forgiven the board for choosing me. Her fists clenched on the table. This isn't just about my company. It's personal. Which means he's emotional, Wei countered, his voice steady. And emotional people slip up. We just need to give him a reason. He outlined a bold, risky plan, hinging on Tanaka's arrogance and greed. Mei listened, her sharp mind absorbing every detail. A slow, predatory smile spread across her face. Let's hunt, she said. 2 days later, Mei called an emergency board meeting. She stood at the head of the polished ebony table, radiating confidence. Wei stood against the back wall, a silent presence in a tailored suit Ryu had insisted he buy. He looked the part of head of security, his presence unsettling the board members. I have extraordinary news, Mei announced, her voice vibrant. I've been in secret talks to acquire Phoenix Robotics, a San Francisco-based firm. This acquisition will cement our dominance in the tech sector for decades. A ripple of shock and excitement swept the room. Phoenix was a giant, and the deal would be a monumental victory. The deal is in its final stages, May continued, her voice steady and commanding. I'm flying to San Francisco tomorrow night to meet with Phoenix Robotics CEO and sign the papers. The announcement goes public Friday. Wei watched Hiro Tanaka closely. The man's face was a polished mask of enthusiasm. May, this is remarkable, Hiro said, his tone warm. A brilliant move. Congratulations. But Wei caught it, a glint of cold calculation in his eyes. The bait had been taken. Hiro wouldn't let May close a deal that would solidify her power. For the next 24 hours, Lin Tower buzzed with carefully staged deception. Wei moved through the offices, loudly discussing fake flight details and hotel bookings on his phone. He staged a heated argument with Jianwu in the security hub about lax protocols at the San Francisco hotel, ensuring eavesdroppers overheard. He played the part of a new security chief, capable but slightly overwhelmed, making the operation seem ripe for attack. In truth, Wei was assembling a tight-knit team of operators from his past, loyal men who owed him their lives, not a paycheck. Ryu, meanwhile, transformed a derelict warehouse on the city's industrial fringe into a high-tech trap, rigged with cameras, microphones, and remote-controlled spotlights. The night of the staged trip arrived. A black SUV, identical to May's usual transport, pulled away from Lin Tower. Inside was a small security detail and a woman with dark hair styled like May's, a body double Wei had hired. Wei and the real May were miles away, hidden in a mobile command center Ryu had set up in a van a quarter-mile from the warehouse. They're moving, Ryu said, eyes locked on a laptop tracking a GPS signal. He'd slipped a micro-tracker onto a car belonging to one of Hiro's known associates from Titan Security Solutions. They're tailing the decoy, just as you predicted, Sensei. Wei watched a traffic camera feed on another monitor, spotting the Titan car, a black sedan, following the SUV. They'll hit on the industrial access road past the river bridge. It's isolated. May sat beside him, her face lit by the screen's glow, her hands clenched. She was watching a plan mimicking her own abduction. It unfolded exactly as Wei predicted. Two black vans boxed in the SUV on the empty road. Armed men in tactical gear swarmed the vehicle, disabling its cameras. The feed cut out. They have her, May whispered, her voice taut. They have the decoy, Wei corrected, his tone calm. He spoke into a throat mic. All teams, they're en route. Go dark. Await my signal. 10 minutes later, Ryu's warehouse cameras flickered to life. The vans pulled into the dusty, cavernous space. The armed men dragged the struggling, hooded body double from the SUV. They moved with professional confidence. Their leader, a wiry man with a jagged scar across his jaw, pulled out a phone. We have her, he said. No issues. He paused, listening. Understood. We'll hold her until you arrive. He ended the call and turned to his team. Mr. Tanaka's coming. Prep her. He yanked off the hood. His face fell. It wasn't Mei Lin, it was a stranger, an actress with fear in her eyes but a spark of defiance. She was playing her role flawlessly. What is this? The scarred man growled. Where is she? At that moment, powerful spotlights blazed on, flooding the warehouse in blinding white. The men flinched, shielding their eyes. Wei stepped out from behind a stack of crates, a calm, commanding silhouette. His small team emerged from the shadows, weapons raised, encircling the Titan operatives. Wei locked eyes with the scarred leader. Expecting someone else? For a split second, the warehouse was a frozen tableau, the stark light casting long shadows. The scarred man, Kenzo, leader of the Titan team, stared at Wei, his mind grappling with the trap. Then instinct took over. It's a setup. Take them, he shouted, raising his weapon. Wei was ready. Now, he said into his mic. The battle was no drawn-out firefight, it was a masterclass in controlled chaos. From the catwalks above, two of Wei's operators dropped flashbangs, the deafening blasts and blinding flares disorienting Kenzo's team. Ryu, from the command van, cut the main spotlights, plunging the warehouse into darkness. Wei and his team, equipped with night vision, owned the shadows. The Titan operatives fired wildly, their muzzle flashes betraying their positions. Wei's team responded with precise, non-lethal shots, targeting limbs. One by one, Kenzo's men fell, their pain shouts echoing. Wei moved like a specter through the chaos, using crates and machinery as cover, never firing a shot. He closed in on Kenzo, who was barking orders near the loading bay. You, Kenzo snarled, recognizing Wei. He lunged, a combat knife gleaming. He was fast, relying on raw aggression. Wei was a master of precision. He redirected Kenzo's slash with a fluid motion, using the man's momentum to throw him off balance. A sharp elbow to the collarbone, a sweeping kick to the legs, Kenzo crashed to the concrete, gasping. Wei locked his arm in a submission hold, the knife skittering away. "It's over," Wei said calmly in his ear. The spotlight snapped back on, revealing the scene, all 10 Titan operatives down, zip-tied by Wei's team. The fight was over. Then, the low hum of an engine drifted in. A black Bentley pulled up to the loading bay. The rear door opened, and Hiro Tanaka stepped out, his face smug with anticipated victory. Hiro Tanaka expected to see a captured Mei Lin, his victory secured. Instead, his smug smile froze, then crumbled into shock. His elite Titan Security Solutions team lay subdued on the warehouse floor. Wei Chen, the janitor, stood over their scarred leader, Kenzo. And then Mei Lin herself stepped out from behind the command van, her expression as sharp and unyielding as jade. Hiro's face paled. He stumbled back toward his Bentley, but 2 of Wei's operators blocked his path. He was cornered. Mei approached, her heels clicking on the gritty concrete. "You look surprised, Hiro," she said, her voice laced with disdain. "Mei, what is this?" "I got a call about a security breach," he stammered, grasping for a lie. "Save it," she snapped. She nodded to Wei, who hauled Kenzo to his feet and shoved him forward. The scarred man glared at Hiro, his eyes burning with betrayal. "Kenzo," Wei said calmly, "you have a choice. Take the fall for this, attempted kidnapping, assault, corporate espionage, and spend 20 years in prison while he gestured to Hiro, forgets your name the moment you're locked up. Or tell us everything now, and I'll ensure the DA knows you cooperated." Kenzo stared at Hiro's sweating, panicked face. He saw no loyalty, only a powerful man ready to abandon him. His expression hardened. "He hired us," Kenzo spat, his words a flood of anger. "The garage attack, the bugs in your office, he wanted you gone to force a no-confidence vote and take the company." Hiro's composure shattered. "He's lying. This is a setup. You have no proof." "Actually," Mei said, a cold smile curling her lips, "we do." She pointed to a discreet camera on a nearby pillar. "Hiro, say hello to the Lin Enterprises board. They've been watching this live on a secure feed for the past 10 minutes. Hiro seemed to shrink, his arrogance deflated. He was finished. "As of now, you're removed from the board for criminal conspiracy and gross misconduct," Mei declared, her voice ringing with finality. "Security and the police are on their way. You've disgraced your family's legacy, and you'll pay for it for the rest of your life." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. As police swarmed the warehouse, cuffing a muttering Hiro and his men, a quiet calm settled between Wei and Mei. The air, once charged with danger, was now still. The flashing red and blue lights illuminated their faces. Mei turned to Wei, her CEO mask falling away, revealing raw gratitude and exhaustion. "It's over," she whispered, relief flooding her voice. "The threat is," Wei replied, his tone steady. "The rest is just beginning." In the week that followed, the storm settled into a quiet rhythm of rebuilding. Hiro Tanaka's arrest sent ripples through the city's corporate elite, but at Lin Tower, relief prevailed, the poison had been excised. Mei moved with renewed vigor, consolidating her authority. The board, having witnessed her cunning and resilience firsthand, rallied behind her. The fabricated Phoenix Robotics acquisition faded from memory, overshadowed by a CEO who'd outmaneuvered a traitor within. Wei, too, settled into his new reality. He was no longer a janitor playing a part but the head of global security for Lin Enterprises, a role that fit like a well-worn glove. He dismantled the complacent security system, promoting guards who'd shown initiative and bringing in trusted allies, including Ryu, who secured a contract to overhaul the company's cybersecurity. The murmurs about the janitor boss faded, replaced by quiet respect for a man who saw everything. The professional boundaries between Wei and Mei dissolved into something deeper. They were no longer just employer and employee but allies forged in shared peril. Their meetings drifted from security briefings to personal conversations, Wei sharing stories of Hannah, Mei opening up about the isolating weight of leadership. One evening, instead of heading home, Mei joined Wei to pick up Hannah from Mrs. Kim's apartment. The sight of Mei Lin, one of the nation's most powerful women, sitting on Mrs. Kim's lotus-patterned couch, earnestly discussing Hannah's watercolor of a panda, was something Wei never imagined. Hannah, oblivious to corporate hierarchies, had fully embraced Mei Lin. She'd run to her for hugs as easily as she did to Wei, her small arms wrapping around the CEO without hesitation. Mei, in turn, softened under Hannah's boundless affection, the icy armor built from years of corporate warfare melting away. A few weeks later, Mei insisted on attending Hannah's school play. She sat between Wei and Mrs. Kim in the crowded auditorium, watching Hannah, dressed as a slightly swaying lotus flower, deliver her single line with dramatic gusto. As the audience clapped, May's eyes glistened. "She's incredible," she whispered to Wei. "She takes after her mother," Wei said, the words slipping out without the usual sting of grief. It was the first time he'd mentioned Lina to May. She squeezed his hand gently, a silent gesture of understanding that carried more weight than words. That weekend, Wei visited the small cemetery where Lina rested, a place he hadn't been in months. Standing before her simple jade headstone, the breeze stirring the nearby cherry blossoms, he spoke softly. "Hi, Lina. A lot's changed." He recounted the fight, May, the new job, and his fear giving way to a renewed sense of life. "I think you'd like her. She makes Hannah laugh. She makes me laugh." He paused, a single tear tracing his cheek. "I'll always love you. But I think it's time to let someone else in, for us to be happy again." He placed a white chrysanthemum on the grave and walked away, feeling a quiet release, not sorrow. The following Saturday, May invited them to her family's countryside villa. As Hannah dashed through fields of wildflowers, chasing dragonflies, Wei and May sat on a wooden bench by a tranquil pond. "I haven't come here in years," May said, her voice soft. "After my father died, this place was just memories, loneliness. I avoided it." She turned to Wei, her dark eyes clear. "You know, when you climb to the top, you build walls to survive. It's necessary, but it's isolating. I didn't realize how isolated I was until you and Hannah came into my life." Her fingers brushed his hand. Wei turned his hand, lacing his fingers with hers. "That night in the garage, you didn't just need saving, you woke me up. When I saw you in that office, surrounded by betrayal, you made me feel needed, not just as a fighter, but as me. I was a ghost, living for Hannah's sake. You gave me purpose again. You showed her a father she could be proud of." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Hannah's joyful silhouette against the green expanse. "This is crazy," May said, a wry smile tugging at her lips. "I know," Wei replied, his heart fuller than it had been in years. "But it's the only thing that feels right." Their wedding was a quiet affair at the villa's garden, no press or corporate allies, just those who mattered. Ryu stood as Wei's best man, Mrs. Kim dabbed at happy tears, and Hannah, in a flowing white dress, was the most exuberant flower girl, scattering petals with gleeful abandon. May walked toward Wei, not as a CEO but as a radiant woman in a simple silk dress. In her, Wei saw home. He was no longer a janitor in hiding or a sensei haunted by loss, he was a husband, a father, a man who had found his place. Months later, on a sunny afternoon, the three strolled through a city park. Wei's arm rested around May's shoulders, and Hannah skipped ahead, her laughter floating on the breeze. They weren't a CEO, a security chief, and a child, they were a family. A man who'd learned to fight for love, not glory. A woman who'd discovered strength in vulnerability, not walls. And a little girl who'd been their bridge all along. Wei watched his wife and daughter, his heart swelling with quiet gratitude. He'd stepped from shadows into light, and it was more beautiful than he'd ever imagined. And that's where this story ends. I wonder where you are as you read this. What's your world like right now? Are you on a quiet evening walk, curled up at home, or maybe tackling a long commute? It's nice to think of this story finding a moment with you, wherever you are. If you'd like more tales like this to keep you company, you know what to do. A like or follow means another story's waiting when you need it, and it helps others find these journeys too. Thanks for sharing this time with me, it's truly special. Until the next one, stay safe and keep the light close.